If there's any video game I was definitely excited to be able to play for the Nintendo Switch, that would be Cuphead. Released originally on the Xbox One and Steam for the PC and Mac at the end of September of 2017, Cuphead was a huge success when it first came out, and even before it released, people were really fascinated by its concept and overall animation design and throwbacks, making it look like something out of an old school Disney cartoon, all hand-drawn animation and such. I included it on my best video games of 2017 list, but now, since I got my hands on it, I was really especially excited to be able to play this not only at home, but also on the go, since the Nintendo Switch is a hybrid console. So this is one of many re-releases that we got on this big, successful Nintendo console. And yes, it did also just recently release on the PlayStation 4 as well. So, in case you're all wondering, what is Cuphead? I already gave some details. The animation is like something you've seen out of an old school Disney cartoon from like the 1940s. The choppy animation and contrasting and everything, it's purposely made to make it feel old school. And to be honest, it's pretty refreshing. Compared to today's standards, with all cartoons that everything is all CG and digital, this takes a real blast from the past trip right here to my childhood, and even before my childhood for a lot of people who grew up with these kind of cartoons. I mean, it's beyond nostalgic. Now, the main plot, in case you were wondering what it is, it's about these two guys that are, as the title says it, are Cuphead characters. One's called Cuphead, the other's called Mugman. They're kept under the watchful eye of Elder Kettle, yeah, literally, because he's a kettle, and they wander outside and eventually into a casino against his wishes, where, of course, they go on a winning streak and become compulsive gamblers. Eventually, of course, the devil comes in and raises the stakes, where they get suckered into gambling none other than their souls, which eventually they end up losing and have to pay them to the devil himself. Which results in them begging for mercy from him, and so he feels pity for them too, and decides to make a deal, in which if they capture every soul contract of every random character throughout the entire game, he'll spare their lives, leading us to our adventure and the game's concept as well. I love how even though the game is fully animated and hand-drawn, it's definitely not only made for kids, but mostly for adults with that kind of premise, wouldn't you say? So yes, this is the basic gameplay of it. You get a map, the music sounds great and old-fashioned. Well, I should also mention you have to select between Cuphead and Mugman. Both play and control exactly the same, so no difference between each two, aside from their color. So you start the stage, and this is how it is. It's a run and gun type of game, similar to something like Contra if you ever played those kind of games, except you're not actually using a gun, you're using your finger as a weapon. And trust me, you're going to be doing a lot of this, because there's going to be so much shit coming at you. And there's a limit to how many hits you can take. Some enemies can die quick, others take quite a bit more shots until they bite the dust, and others, well, can't be killed, so you have to basically just dodge them. And I should also add that collecting coins throughout these run and gun 'em levels is also key, because it helps you buy stuff, which I'll get into in a little bit, but sometimes they can be in easy locations, and others can be in very obscure, and sometimes, I swear to God, you have to kill yourself to get them locations. So with those kind, I just don't even bother. If I get 2 or 3 out of 4, then I'm happy. So yeah, as I mentioned, these are basic run and gun and shoot 'em levels. There's a few of them in each world. There's only about 3 worlds in this game. In each of these, you get usually a mini boss fight, if not, then a major boss fight at the end of these. Your character gets basic moving forward, backward, jumping, and of course shooting while doing any of these in various different directions, as well as being able to shoot while ducking, again, getting back to Contra, which definitely helps when trying to take out enemies of any sort. There's also this dash move you can do on the ground, but it's definitely much more useful when you're in the air, because then it helps you get over enemies and hazards and gaps and help you reach for coins and such. In the bottom left part of the screen, you've probably noticed these card things. Those are power moves that you get every time you take out a certain amount of enemies. You get a limit of 5 of them, and they all vary depending on which finger weapon you chose. Which brings me to the next part. Yes, using the coins to buy weapon upgrades. Unlike Contra, where you get the weapon upgrades just floating around in random spots in these blimp-like things, in this game, you have to buy them from Pork Rind's Emporium, which is perfectly appropriate considering the merchant is a pig with an eye patch. You start out the game with the basic pea shooter, which gets plenty of good range. but it doesn't do a whole lot of damage in comparison to some of the upgrades that can actually do a hell of a lot more. Yes, some of these actually do more damage than one another, and others have longer range. It'll say in the description as you're browsing through each one of these upgrades. You get the Lobber, which kind of bounces a bit and goes at a much slower rate, but does pretty good damage. You get the Charge, which also does pretty good damage, but you have to hold the button in and have really good precision to be able to use this one correctly. There's the Roundabout, which almost looks like you're throwing a bunch of horseshoes all over the place, and it actually gets pretty good range and coverage. And it does a pretty decent amount of damage, so I would say I'd recommend this one. But the ones I really recommend are the Chaser, which, like the name says, chases down your enemies without having to put much effort into aiming at them, at a pretty damn good range, but at a pretty low damage rate. Again, almost like that weapon upgrade in Contra 3 and 4. As well as, for all you fans of that franchise, the Spread. It does pretty damn good damage, but unfortunately, unlike those games, it sadly only goes at a pretty short range. So, yep, each one of these upgrades, as you can see, has their upside and their downsides. And not only you can buy weapon upgrades from this eye patch swine, but you can also buy what's called charms, which are equipable items that help make the gameplay a little bit easier for yourself. Like the one that I think most people will go for, myself included, which is the additional heart, which adds an extra piece to your health. Trust me, get it while you can. There are other ones that are helpful, like the Smoke Bomb, which allows you to do the dash move without taking damage, or Coffee, which fills up your super meter a little bit faster. Get to that in a little bit. But yeah, you select all these different weapon upgrades, get a choice to be able to use two, and switch between them through any part of these levels. You set one as your primary and one as your secondary weapon. You can set which charm you want to use, only one unfortunately. And then your super arts, which brings me to these levels called the Mausoleum, where you have to protect the urn in the middle of the Mausoleum by getting rid of the ghost by performing a parry move. Yeah, I forgot to also address this move, and this is also used throughout a good majority of the game. Whenever you come across these pink-like things, you jump in the air, and then with good precision, you press the jump button again. You'll deflect off of one of these things, bringing you in the air a little bit higher with sort of a double jump move. And with these ghosts, well, you could pretty much say screw you to gravity. As long as you keep parrying and flicking off of these spirits, you'll keep in the air as long as possible, but, as I said, make sure not one of them gets near the urn, otherwise, well, you have to start over. Each world has one of these, and as you'd expect, each one gets harder and harder. But if you successfully exterminate the paranormal, you get, as I mentioned, a super art move, which is, well, remember what I said about the super power moves, how you get a limit of 5 of them? Well, if you let that meter, which is represented by those cards in the bottom left corner, fill up all the way to 5, well, you can go all out and use it on your enemies, depending on which one you have unlocked and available and which one you have selected on the menu screen on the map, because, just like the charms, you can only select one, and you can do all sorts of crazy shit, for a temporary period obviously, like throw a horizontal energy beam at your enemy, which does a pretty large amount of damage, get temporary invincibility, which is definitely useful I should say, and my favorite, spawning a giant ghost which spins around and also does a large amount of damage to your enemies around you. Now, I did say that run and gun'em levels are the primary part of the game, but most of the game actually consists of regular boss fights, where you have to fight these various enemies that usually come in several different phases, and you complete these to obtain the soul contract, which is part of your deal with the devil. Majority of them are on land, but then there's also several of them that take place in the air, putting you in an airplane, which unfortunately if you have a weapon upgrade doesn't let you use it. So you're down to a basic pea shooter, or you could switch between this other bomb dropping weapon, which doesn't get as good of range, and it arches itself downward a little bit, almost similar to the Lobber upgrade. But with one special move card, you can throw these giant bullet bomb things, which definitely get better range than that thing. And if you save up all 5 cards, instead of getting the super arts move, you turn into a giant bomb and explode in front of the enemy, but you have to be at close range to really have any effect.
And the one thing I should probably pinpoint, and you probably already know about this game, it's hard as yes, I am not kidding you. I mean, don't let the simple style of animation throw you off. This game will really heighten your senses and challenge you every which way possible, and even in some cases frustrate the living hell out of you. I mean, wow. I'm not kidding. I mean, just look at all this shit that comes at you. Anything, I mean anything in these boss fights or running Gundam levels is trying to kill you. So you really have to be on top of your game to make it through this one. And every time you die, it tells you exactly how far you got within the level or the fight, basically to kind of, I guess, give you the idea of how much further you have to go, or in some cases kind of insult you like, yeah, nice try, but you still gotta beat it all the way through. But after so much trial and error, it'll keep you coming back and back until you succeed. Trust me. And once you get that bravo at the end of completing that level, or one of these fights, man, you could take a breath of a sigh of relief, because you have definitely accomplished one of many difficult missions in this game, of collecting the soul contracts. Okay, yes. Now I have to mention that when every time you beat these fights, you get the soul contract. Oh wait, no, only if you beat it on the normal difficulty. That's right, you get two separate difficulties. If you choose the simple difficulty, you don't get it. And it definitely makes the fight a lot easier, but if you tried it on the harder one, well, guess what? It's definitely ups the difficulty, and that's where you really have to put your skills to the test. I'm not kidding. As I said, there's only 3 worlds, but believe me, it will keep you busy for a hell of a long time until you beat them all the way through. I mean, my god. The hardest running Gundam levels, in my opinion, are this one, where you have to parry between the floor and the ceiling. Sort of like a gravitational pull-like thing. And it can really throw you off because if you're on the ceiling and you don't land on a platform that's in the air, well, it counts as touching a pit and you lose a piece of your health. And add in all the shit that's being thrown at you, as well as the mini boss fights. I mean, jeez, you think that one comes out of hell? How about this one, where you're on the pier? Doesn't seem so hard at the beginning, but just you wait. When you get to this part with the octopus, let me tell you, much easier said than done right there.